President Trump has made history, becoming the first sitting US leader to enter North Korea. He briefly stepped across the border while meeting the North's leader, Kim Jong-un, for an impromptu mini-summit between the pair. Pyongyang didn't confirm the meeting would actually happen until pretty much the last moment, but meet they did. The leaders shaking hands across the border at the Korean Demilitarized Zone, one of the most heavily fortified borders in the world. Kim said he was surprised that Donald Trump's offer to get together was announced on Twitter, before adding the American president's visit was a great sign of willingness for relations to improve. Trump himself described it as a great honor.
This is my honor. I didn't really expect it. We were in Japan for the G20. We came over and I said, hey, I'm over here. I want to call it Chairman Kim. And we got to meet, and stepping across that line was a great honor. A lot of progress has been made.
President Trump has just walked across the demarcation line that made him the first US president to visit our country. I believe, just looking at this action, this is an expression of his willingness to eliminate all the unfortunate past and open a new future.
Earlier, I discussed the meeting and the significance of it with our senior correspondent, Murat Gazdeev.
Trump said it himself, speed is no longer of the essence. They're now talking about progress rather than speed. So in that vein, they've now come up with working groups, negotiation groups from North Korea, from the United States. They're going to get together and they're going to try to find common areas where they agree. They're going to start meeting in 2 or 3 weeks. So we'll see if progress comes from that. But of course, sanctions are the thing that are really impeding everything.
They're staying on. I mean, at some point, look, I'm looking forward to taking them off. I don't like sanctions being on this country. I'm looking forward, but the sanctions remain, yes. But at some point during the negotiation, things can happen. And that's what we'll be talking about.
It is exactly because of sanctions that the last meeting between the two leaders, North Korean leader and Donald Trump, that it came to nothing. Talks ended 2 hours early, and afterwards is politically quite depressing because there was completely nothing that came out of it.
As for North Korea, they've got the coup of getting a sitting US president onto their land the first ever time. What else? What do they want here?
Well, Donald Trump said that the North Koreans wanted sanctions to be lifted completely, and he said that there's no way that is going to happen for now. The North Korean foreign affairs ministry came out and said, no, we asked for sanctions to be lifted partially, and that the United States demanded something extra to denuclearization to go ahead and begin lifting sanctions, which he said is unacceptable.
This is a manifestation of the most extreme hostile acts by the United States. All these speak clearly to the fact that the wild dream of the United States to bring us to our knees by means of sanctions and pressure has not changed at all, but grows even more undisguised.
The US Senate on Thursday passed a bill that would allow for the strengthening of sanctions with regards to North Korea. So you know, there is a trust issue as well.
And sanctions is the issue. This is the overriding theme, isn't it? Is there any sense, do we have an idea when they may be lifted or otherwise?
They're looking for concrete details, concrete achievements before they begin lifting sanctions. And they want them verified. But again, it's going to take time. So denuclearization efforts, progress to be put in place, and then verified by the United States. It's all going to take time. But as I said, trust, big issue.
We don't expect Chairman Kim to tell us the truth. That's why we're going to verify any denuclearization that takes place. It's why we will ensure that we see actual on the ground outcomes. We're not going to take anyone's word for it.
This is going to take time and a lot of effort, and they need to keep talking.
All right, always good to welcome John White onto the programme. John's a political commentator and journalist and speaks to us today live from Edinburgh. Hi there, John. Donald Trump, Kim Jong-un have met. What do you think was top of the agenda for both leaders with the unprecedented encounter?
Well, while this meeting, this historic event may have given Donald Trump his moment in history, the moment in history he clearly craves, I don't think it does much to alleviate the suffering of the North Korean people. And I think what we're seeing now is politics of gesture rather than substance. The North Koreans will be mindful of the way that they believe they were tricked after the Singapore summit when they began to dismantle some of their nuclear testing facilities and missile testing facilities on the premise that there would be a quid pro quo running parallel from the Americans in the form of the lifting of some of the sanctions. North Koreans only found to their cost that that was not the case, and the sanctions were actually tightened. So I don't think the North Koreans can afford to trust these gesture politics any further. We've had 2 summits, the first in Singapore, just mentioned, in 2018, and the second in Vietnam earlier this year. And out of these summits have come nothing, have come a big round zero thus far. So the North Koreans will be mindful of that. They'll also be mindful on a wider level of the way the Americans are going after the Iranians and the way they've been advocating regime change and actively, openly agitating towards regime change in Venezuela. And while arch neocons of the ilk of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo occupy prominent positions in the Trump administration, trust is the key issue.
Kim Jong-un, he says that the handshake in the demilitarized zone symbolizes change. That's a pretty hefty and lofty statement. Is it the case?
No, at this juncture, I don't think so. Obviously, Kim Jong-un has to say that because he's desperate to have these sanctions lifted. The North Korean people are suffering inordinate harm and enduring such privation that no other people could probably endure. And they have done over many years under previous administrations also. But the US Senate, as we've just heard, has just passed a bill to tighten the sanctions. So the optics are very impressive. On the symbolic level, it's a very powerful gesture. But we need to start seeing some substance from this administration, because hitherto we're seeing a lot of shadow, but very little in the way of meaningful gestures towards a meaningful peace. It seems to me that the Americans under this administration are interested in a Roman peace, which does not involve the elevation of countries such as North Korea to a position of parity, but their complete subjugation in the interests of US capital.
One interesting line from this, John. President Trump invited the North Korean leader to the US. Do you think that Kim would accept? If he did, what would the reaction in the US be?
Oh, there'd be an almighty cri de coeur from the liberal wing of the US political class at such an invitation. In fact, we're already seeing that in the liberal press in the US. It would be very difficult for him to make that happen unless the Americans see some meaningful steps on the North Korean side to dismantle their nuclear program. But the North Koreans would be insane to dismantle the nuclear program at this juncture, given the reasons I just outlined with regards to the bellicosity the Americans are moving towards the Iranians with, and also its actions in its own hemisphere were trying to affect regime change in Venezuela. So the North Koreans are up, their backs are against the wall, but they have a card to play, and that is their nuclear program. And the Americans are desperate to see that dismantled, because it's a very heavy presence they have in South Korea. It's a very heavy financial commitment, and also they want North Korea in their camp, so to speak, and pull it away from the influence of China for wider geopolitical and geostrategic reasons.
President Trump claims that previous US administrations were not good for North or South Korea. We can just take a quick listen together, John.
What was happening during the previous administration was very bad for South Korea and very bad for North Korea, frankly. There was a lot of bad things happening, and it's changed very, very rapidly, and it's very positive. There are a lot of positive things going on right now.
Well, have things really changed under Donald Trump? You said a few moments ago, maybe the more hawkish elements of his administration maybe are put to the side, and Donald Trump goes beyond John Bolton and the like and goes and talks to these leaders face to face. Is that something promising?
Yes, of course. George Orwell is always better than war, as Winston Churchill famously said. But let's not forget who the author of this process of normalization was. It was South Korea's president, Moon Jae-in, who took the first steps towards the normalization of North and South when he held a meeting with the North Korean leader that took the Americans by surprise. And so Trump has jumped to the start of this issue because he understood that this was a process that he had to get involved with, otherwise he would be seen as being obstructionist. So it's the South Korean president, Moon Jae-in, who deserves all the credit for how this has developed thus far, and the fact that these two leaders are now speaking. And certainly Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un seem to have developed quite a good and convivial personal relationship. But substantively, it's very important to understand that until these sanctions begin to be lifted, the North Koreans cannot trust any gestures on the part of Donald Trump or any member of his administrations, especially with the likes of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo in that administration, given their ideological commitment to US hard power.
John, thanks for your time today. We've been speaking to John White, political commentator and journalist. Have a good rest of the weekend.